Today's episode takes us into the unsavoury world of online grooming, where someone over time befriends a child, building up their trust while hiding the real motive, which is to exploit and cause harm. Back in 2014, a few female school friends were having a laugh together. One of the girls was named Sophie Elms, who was only 13 years old at the time. Another from amongst these young ladies took Sophie's phone off her, and as a joke she used it to set up an online dating profile on her behalf. However, she lied about Sophie's age, placing her as a 22-year-old. Not long after this event, Sophie started receiving messages which she initially ignored, but no doubt found it amusing that people out there on the World Wide Web were taking an interest. Eventually, someone sent a message that said something like, "Hi sexy." Once again, she ignored it. But who sent a 13-year-old that message? Whoever it was started sending similar messages on a regular basis. After a while, the young girl caved in and replied. Shortly after replying, she announced on Facebook she was now in a relationship. But who was the relationship with? It makes sense if it was another young person, similar in age, as that's normal behaviour. Teenagers often form new partnerships, stay in them for a while, before moving on. It's all part of growing up. In my earlier years, I went through this exact same process as a teenager, and I'm sure many of us can relate to it. But we still don't know the identity of the mysterious person who contacted her, or whether or not it was the same individual she'd entered a relationship with. Was it another young person from amongst her peers? Or could it possibly have been someone online with sinister motives, perhaps even a dangerous predatory paedophile? Sophie Elms lived in Swindon, Wiltshire in the southwest of England with a mother and stepfather. Swindon is a fast-growing town with a population of 230,000 people, making it one of the largest towns in the UK without city status. It's home to 53 primary schools and 11 secondary schools, 8 of which have an outstanding rating with Ofsted, and 58 of them have been considered as very good, making it a great place for education. In terms of higher education, Swindon College offers a wide selection of full and part-time courses, and it was here that Sophie Elms enrolled in a childcare course when she left school at 16. But there was an issue. 3 years had passed since she started receiving those online messages, and during that period, Sophie had been made to feel relatively good about herself due to these contacts. In fact, she developed online relationships with at least 4 different men who sadly had ulterior motives. To understand this young woman a little bit better, her neighbours occasionally observed her walking the dog. She was considered by them as being a caring and friendly person, and those who knew her felt she was rather naive while lacking social skill, as well as being immature for her age. And these were the very things that made her a reasonable target for grooming. And let me explain what I mean. By the time Sophie became a teenager, she had lost confidence in herself and had problems trying to find a boyfriend. Her self-esteem was so low, it created difficulties making friends. Maybe her physical appearance made her worry that she wasn't as attractive as other girls. I'm not saying that that was the case, I'm simply suggesting that this may have entered her mind. However, she certainly struggled to fit in with her peers. But what we do know is that she loved her dog, she loved her family, and enjoyed watching EastEnders alongside movies aimed at the younger generation. It seemed as if, when she was at school, people didn't really bother too much with her. Yet she had some friends, probably not as many as she wanted, but she was going through that teenage phase where youngsters can experience a sudden drop in confidence for a variety of reasons. So I can imagine, when those online messages began, it didn't take too long for Sophie to reply. All of that online attention she was experiencing, especially when being told things like how nice she looked, or other types of compliments, excited the young girl. and all of this started when she was only 13. By the time she enrolled on a college course in 2017, she'd formed a new online relationship with another man. His name was David Gearing, and by this time she was familiar with being chatted up online. In fact, we could go as far as saying she was softened up and was now ripe for being fully exploited. And Gearing didn't hang around, as he realised she was very vulnerable. Therefore, he wasted no time in telling her exactly what she wanted to hear, making her feel good about herself at a deeper level. Remember, when she was only 13, a friend of hers jokingly set up a false online dating profile of Sophie. And what a friend didn't realise, and of course nobody else was aware of this, was that that action would lead to Sophie eventually becoming known as Britain's youngest female paedophile. Let's just talk about David Gearing for a moment. Who was he? And what did he get Sophie to do? First of all, it's important to highlight that paedophiles can be found from all walks of life. They're often the kindest or the most generous people within society, hence the massive shockwaves we receive when they're uncovered. See, Gearing had been a police officer for 27 years. As a matter of fact, he was a detective with the Metropolitan Police Homicide and Serious Crime Unit until 2008, and that was a year he was convicted for the first time. The reason for his conviction related to actively taking and distributing indecent images of children. His punishment was 2.5 years in prison, meaning he was a known sex offender. His unfortunate relationship with Sophie began in 2017, and the timing came conveniently, as far as he was concerned, as their online meeting coincided with a babysitting job Sophie had just engaged in for a lovely couple who were keen to provide the young woman an opportunity to enhance her childcare skill. The children she was entrusted with were 2 females aged 2 and 3. Her new online friend, Gearing, swiftly moved in to take full advantage. Initially, their communication was non-sexual, but what became clear between them was this. Sophie was receptive to this guy, who made several requests of her, which she happily fulfilled, even if it meant causing potential psychological damage to the 2 toddlers. And after making his emotional connection, which was his way in, to start manipulating Sophie, he asked about her babysitting position, and it became clear he had a thing for children. Before long, he was asking for photographs of the 2 little sisters, and Sophie, being naive and immature, felt comfortable sending him the images. However, now that he tested the boundaries and was successful, I'm sure you know where this is heading. Yes, he wanted more pictures of the children, each time showing a little less clothing, until he managed to convince Sophie to send naked pictures of the girls. With her inhibitions now lowered, Gearing was ready to move to another level. The naked photos were no longer enough, as he was looking for more disturbing material. Using manipulation, he encouraged Sophie to indecently touch the children, while taking photos or recording videos doing this for his satisfaction. In other words, he was telling her to physically and sexually abuse them on his behalf. And let's remind ourselves that at the time, Sophie was studying childcare at Swindon College, while also being on placement at a local nursery as part of her course. Her coursework included substantial training regarding child health and safety, with a ton of policies with reference to safeguarding children. Although she was immature, she knew exactly what that meant. Yet because she felt something for this piece of slime, maybe infatuation or a deep need to have him in her life, she placed his depraved need above everything else. And his needs were trauma-provoking. This unfounded sense of loyalty was something that he exploited to the max. All the filthy images he received were shared via WhatsApp with a group of other paedophiles. I'm not going into detail regarding what she did to those 2 little sisters, but you can check that for yourself if you want by clicking on the research section in the description box down below. However, it made me angry, not just toward the vile man behind it, but also at young Sophie, who clearly knew right from wrong, yet was actively supporting and became part of a paedophile ring. The only good news to share was this. David Gearing was arrested not long after grooming Sophie in a separate case relating to his predatory behaviour. In November 2018, he was sentenced to 15 years imprisonment. I believe he was 59 at the time, and remember, he was a former detective working with the Homicide and Serious Crime Unit. 2 mobile phones were found during a police raid on his home, and the find revealed his involvement with an unsavoury network of child predators. The images sent to him by Sophie were also found on his phone, and fortunately traced all the way back to her as the source, prompting authorities to make an additional arrest. Now, she was arrested in March 2018 as a direct result, and it transpires she committed most of the offences when she was only 17, although her grooming began much earlier, while her offending started at 16. The extent of her betrayal was spelt out on the indictment at Swindon Crown Court, where she was found guilty of the following: 2 charges of sexual assault by penetration, 2 charges of sexual assault by touching, 4 charges of taking indecent images, 6 charges of distributing indecent images, as she actually sent these out to 3 other men, and 2 charges of possessing extreme pornography, including that of an animal. She pled guilty to every one of the 16 charges. However, there were no signs of remorse. In January 2018, she was sentenced to 7 years and 10 months detention, while also being placed on the sex offenders register indefinitely. That sentence reflects some leniency from the judge, as it was only half the amount of prison time that she should have received. Now, when she's eventually released, a ban's in place to prevent her from working with children, which is good. And at the time of the sentencing, she was only 18, making her one of the youngest women in Britain to be convicted for these type of offences. However, something the judge said to Sophie stood out pretty clearly. He said she was a victim, but also a perpetrator. He said she was good at manipulation, particularly as she wanted to appease the man she was attracted to and wanted his attention. To get that attention, Sophie prioritised it over the welfare of those 2 young, vulnerable children. This was a young woman who once enjoyed a reasonable standing in the community. Outwardly, at least, she seemed to be sensible enough. She was good-natured and the perfect person to babysit for someone. She ticked all the right boxes for the couple with those 2 children, who had no idea at all what she was capable of. And I sincerely hope they're not blaming themselves for what she did. I mean, this case sent shockwaves throughout Britain when it broke, and it certainly broke the parents of those 2 little girls, as highlighted by the distressing impact statement the father read in court when Elms was sentenced. He said,
"The damage Sophie Elms has caused to our family is unimaginable. Our 2 beautiful daughters looked up to you. We asked you if you wanted to care for them overnight to help with your studies. Not for one moment would we have imagined that this decision would change our lives forever. We honestly do not know the full extent of the damage you have left on our 2 beautiful babies. What you did could have serious long-term effects on them in their later lives. We have such a complete lack of trust to anyone with our children now. Even leaving them at preschool is a challenge to us, as this was the profession in which you were training. Our youngest daughter is so distraught at bedtime that we have to stay with her for several hours. We have made the decision that we cannot stay in Swindon for fear of bumping into you, and that it will be better for us to move abroad. This whole horrific event has damaged us beyond words."
Elms was sitting just a few feet away in the dock when he was reading, and allegedly broke down in tears. It was the first time she exhibited any emotion. The impact statement managed to strip the flesh from the bone, in describing how that brutal betrayal of trust resulted in complete trauma for that unfortunate family. Their children not only experienced nightmares, but night terrors had been introduced to them, where they would scream, shout, and endure extreme episodes of panic due to what someone put them through. And that someone was Sophie Elms, who's been dubbed as Britain's youngest female paedophile. What did you think about her sentence? Was it reasonable, or perhaps too lenient? And also, if she never met those repulsive characters online, would she have committed these type of offences regardless? Well, let me know your views on this in the comments section.